to say what you reminded me of my very first day in office, in 1997, actually it's a good introduction to leadership, because I came to power. We've been in opposition for 18 years, my party, and we have this thing in Britain where what happens is that we have the election on the Thursday, then if you win the election, the sitting Prime Minister you defeated packs his bags and goes out the back door, and then you come in the front door, right, with your suitcases straight after. And the tradition is that the staff in Downing Street, they line up on either side of the corridor going down to the cabinet room at the end of the entrance into Downing Street, and they're supposed to applaud out the old Prime Minister, and then they applaud in the new Prime Minister, right, make him feel good. His first day in office. So anyway, we've been in opposition for 18 years, so the other guy left, went out the back door, I come in. You see, they were used to the other people because they'd been there for 18 years, so I was going down the line and shaking hands, and they were crying. You know, I got to the end of the line and started to feel guilty about the whole thing, really. But then I remember going into the cabinet room, and there was the guy who was the chief of the civil service, the permanent person in the British system, and he was just sitting in a chair, and there was a chair opposite to him, and he motioned me to the chair to sit down. So my first day in Downing Street, I was very nervous, and he said in that very British way, he said, "Well done." And then he paused for a moment and he said, "What now?" And it's the what now that is the tough part of leadership, as I discovered. So, the problem really is that the skill set that takes you to leadership is not necessarily the skill set that best serves you as leader. Right, so you campaign to win as the great persuader, and then you end up as the chief executive. And there's a big difference. One is expressed in words, the other is judged in actions. And leadership is always about taking responsibility when others would shrink from it. It's about stepping out and not stepping back. And it's about being prepared to take the criticism and the inevitable chorus of disapproval, pretty noisy usually, that is leadership's accompaniment. And here and right now, in this region and across the world, leadership has become especially tough. Today we live in what you might call an era of uniquely low predictability, and in a context in which sometimes all the choices are ugly. So, if you look at the economic debate across the Western world, it rages between austerity and those going for growth. There's a huge debate about quantitative easing in America, in Europe, and the UK. I read recently 2 papers, one written by one very distinguished economist saying quantitative easing is a nightmare, the other by one saying it was in fact the world's salvation. Which is right. As a leader, you're expected to know, except you can't know, because the cozy economic consensus of the late 20th and early 21st centuries departed with the crisis, and in its place is confusion. But the leader still has to decide, because leaders are decision makers and decision takers. And in this region right now, the ugly choices abound. To intervene in Syria or not? To compromise with the Muslim Brotherhood or not? Did the West make a mistake in supporting the Arab upheavals, or was it inevitable? How do we stop the nuclear ambitions of Iran? And everywhere you look, there is uncertainty and unpredictability and instability. And the problem for leaders is that very often the best short-term politics pulls in the opposite direction from the best long-term policy. So, for example, much of the sentiment in the West right now is undoubtedly to stay out of Syria, indeed to stay out of the region's politics. But as every day that passes shows, the cost of staying out may be paid in a higher price later. So, this is a tough time to be a leader. And one thing I've learned for sure since leaving office, by the way, is that it's a lot easier to give the advice than take the decision. So what I say is said with humility more than experience. But in my view, in unpredictable terms, and in times that are uncertain, when the calculation of interest and risk is hard, as a leader, there is only really one recourse, and that is to do what you believe to be right, even if it's unpopular. Stick with what you believe, lead from a point of principle, because the conventional wisdom of today may be the disposable folly of tomorrow. Now, what does that mean here in the Middle East? First, it means that we should stand up for true democracy. And democracy is not just a way of voting, it's a way of thinking. It isn't simply about how the majority takes power. It's then about how the majority treats the minority. Democracy is pluralistic in nature. It means treating all people equally, irrespective of race or faith. It means treating men and women equally. It means the rule of law, in which citizens know judges are impartial and free from political pressure. And it means religion in its proper place, with a voice but not a veto. So whether it's in Egypt or Iraq or Libya or Tunisia or in what comes next, in Syria, when the nightmare ends, there should be a constitutional settlement in which the rights of all are equal and guaranteed. Second, we have to recognize there will not be democratic progress without economic progress. Now in Europe, we've got an aging population. Average age now around about 40. In the Middle East, there's a population whose median age is often in the early 20s. And each year there are going to be more and more of these young people searching for jobs. And it's clear what works in a modern economy. Open markets, predictable rules for doing business, an educated workforce. Yet some of the new governments in the region are at risk of moving the opposite direction, driven by short-term populism to increase the public sector, harass the private sector, and fail to deliver basic services and infrastructure. And this is hugely dangerous. The thing about democracy is it's a way of deciding who the decision makers are, but it's not a substitute for taking the decisions. And these economic decisions are vital and urgent and have to be right. So thirdly, leaders have to think creatively today about how to deliver change. And this is true if you're a prime minister or a president or a mayor of a city. And it's the CEO part of leadership. And in the work I do today, with my governance initiative in many countries, I see that for many of those countries, yes, honesty and transparency are big challenges. But you know the biggest challenge for government is efficacy. It's getting things done. And the good news is that the lessons of what works are pretty clear. The hard part is doing it. The best modern government works through empowerment and partnership, not command and control. The best public delivery systems have diverse providers, consumer power, and strong public-private partnerships. And you know, particularly in the fields of education and healthcare, and especially with the impact of technology today, which is transformational, there's no Western country that would create the types of legacy systems we have today in education or healthcare if we would beginning from today. So, countries that are developing in this region should learn the lessons and apply them. But fourth, progress cannot come without stability, or stability without security. And we have to be prepared to be strong in the defense of our values. It's why Iran's nuclear ambitions and export of terrorism around the region are a threat. And we must be determined to confront and overcome that threat. And those that hold power in Tehran must feel that determination and know that we are going to be vigorous in upholding our principles. Any choice involving military action is fraught, and no one wants it. But a nuclear-armed Iran is the worst choice, and we shouldn't make it. And finally, leaders, whether here or elsewhere, have to be visionaries. Shimon Peres, in one of his inimitable quotes, once put it to me absolutely brilliantly. He said this. He said, you know, a leader in office has to decide, does he want to be in the history book or the guest book? Classic Shimon statement. Right now, in this region, we need leadership for peace, for the history book between Israelis and Palestinians. I think resolution of this conflict remains essential to the security of Israel, to the dignity of Palestinians. And I want to be very clear, some people say a two-state solution is now a fantasy. I say the fantasy is in thinking a one-state solution would ever be remotely sustainable or consistent with the values Israel represents. So, let's hope that over the coming weeks, a plan for progress can be put in place in which politics, economics and security are aligned. With Secretary John Kerry's fantastic energy and commitment, we're all working hard to accomplish it. But we should understand the window of opportunity will be open for only a short space of time, and we must go through it together. If not, the window will close again, and could even close forever. So time is not our friend, this is urgent, and this is now, and it is a time for statesmen and not simply politicians. So, peace is important, but it will not depend simply on negotiations. Peace is in some ways a state of mind, as well as states with borders. And there's a shift in the psyche of each side that also has to happen. Israel must see a viable sovereign Palestinian state, not as a reward to the Palestinians for good behavior, but as a strategic necessity for Israel's future security and as a right for the Palestinian people. And the Palestinians must see that for Israel to feel confident enough to make peace, they need to know that such a Palestinian state will be properly governed, with a Palestinian politics unified in pursuit of an agreement that recognizes clearly Israel's right to exist and ends the conflict once and for all. So, peace is important here and for all of us. Why? Because peace would also symbolize reconciliation and respect, not only between two states, but two peoples. My final point is this, that the great political divide of our time, I think, is less between traditional left and right, but that's important, and more between the open-minded and the closed-minded. The open-minded see a world in which different faiths and races and cultures mix and mingle as an opportunity. The closed mind sees it as a menace. Yet globalization, an unstoppable force driven by Technology and people, not laws and governments, pushes us together. We live interconnected and interdependent, and such a world only works through respect for difference. So you may have your faith and I mine, but my faith does not make me superior to you, or you to me. And those who use religion as a badge of identity in opposition to those of a different faith put our world at risk. So, what I believe is the great challenge of leadership, apart from all the obvious ones, is that we educate our young people the world over to have an open mind towards those that are different from themselves. So that's leadership that makes a difference. And this state of Israel was created, partly in reaction to the horrors of prejudice, but also imbued from the beginning with the spirit of great thinkers who had minds open to the future, eager to discover its possibilities. And so we have this remarkable country of Israel today. Shimon Peres was one of those thinkers. He's still thinking of the future and of tomorrow. He may be 90, but he has the spirit of a 30-year-old, and that's the spirit we need today.